All right. I think we could be live, and I'm super excited that we are because I am joined by a legend in the indie space who is a person who is a author and an editor, and I'm super excited to actually meet someone that's a little bit outside of the author space I've been talking to. Because I started this whole booktube journey maybe like 6 months ago, and I've been talking to authors. I talked to a couple booktubers, but I haven't talked to anyone really outside of that. So, Sarah, I'm super excited for you to join us tonight so we can dive a little bit into the editing side of the world. It's a little bit different than, an author, but you are also an author as well. So that makes it even
Mhm.
more exciting. So, how is it going for you tonight?
Good. It's good. It's, a night.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm very appreciative for you joining me here. I know you're a couple hours uh, was it behind me? I'm 2 hours ahead of you over here in Florida, and it's
Yeah.
crazy that tonight it's actually cold out in Florida. Like this is the one night where a random cold front just came through, and actually I had to put the hoodie on because I was walking the dogs earlier, and it was just kind of nippy out.
What do you consider cold though? That's the question.
So right now it's like 60 degrees, and I'm like, oh my god, that's freezing.
Yeah, yeah, my parents lived in Vegas and they were like that for a while. When they moved back here, it would get to be 60 and they'd be bundling up freezing.
Yeah, that's what Floridians do. Absolutely, it gets below 70. Like, okay, it's time to get out the winter jacket, get my hat on. It's hilarious. But again, thank you for being here. I know this is called the Book Brew tonight. I actually brought some tea with me because I know you mentioned that you weren't much of a beer drinker, which is absolutely fine. And I have this Crystal Light
Uh,
raspberry iced tea. So it's not like a crazy tea out of a can or anything, but I made a picture of this earlier and I have it right here in front of me. And so far, it tastes pretty dang good.
yeah, I've got Crystal Light going too. So, hey,
No way.
great minds. Yeah,
Which flavor you
yep.
got? It's like
I
normal
got
tea?
strawberry lemonade.
Strawberry
That's
lemon. I don't know
my
if I've tried that one.
It's just a water flavoring, but that's my favorite one.
Hmm. I'm all about those. Like, does the one, is it like the packet one or the one like you squeeze the bottle?
The squeeze it, yeah.
Yeah, those are good. I can
Yeah.
drink that all day sometimes, but maybe just plain water would be good every so often. So, quick question, or I guess a quick statement. The statement that's like about did the chicken come before the egg? Now, for you, did editing become before you were a writer? Like, which one came first for you?
I've always been writing. It's been something I've done, I mean, as long as I can remember. So it was definitely writing for me. And then it was learning to read critically as a reviewer turned into editing.
Oh, okay. So you were always right. Like, oh, since I have not read any of your books just yet, like, which was your first book that you published?
Seraphina's Lament.
Oh, so I looked at that cover, and the cover is beautiful, by the way. It looks
Thanks.
awesome. So that is a fantastic first book to publish. Um, so you mentioned that you're also a reviewer, and were you like under like your own blog for a while in terms of where you reviewed stuff, or were you with like a
Yeah,
review
I
group?
still have it online too, and I'll write a review. I'll write reviews when I have time.
Hmm.
Is how it is right now. So it'll be a few months usually between, then I'll have like a spurt where I'll have time to read again and then I won't. So it just depends. But yeah, it's still there. I mean, you can look at it. It's reviews going back to I think 2010.
Wow, no way. That's a good
Yeah.
amount of time.
Yeah.
So, how many books do you usually read a year? How many are you able to get to?
On my free time,
Yeah.
not not as many anymore.
Hmm.
My relationship with reading has changed a lot because of editing. So
Yes.
usually now what I do read is nonfiction, historical stuff because I don't edit that. And so
Yeah.
my issue is like fantasy. Last night I was trying to read something and I had it on my Kindle and it's like midnight
Hmm.
and I'm reading along and there's a word that doesn't need to be in the sentence and I start clicking it and I'm trying to delete it out of there and I'm like, why won't this thing delete? And and I'm like, because you're on your Kindle, you dumbass. And so that was the answer. But that's why I can't read fantasy that much anymore. I have to be like in this really specific mood where
Yeah.
my inner editor is just too tired. So right now I just read historical nonfiction and those go a lot slower. So
Mhm.
not a whole lot, but I edit between 50 and 60 unique works a year. So between my work life and my free reading life, I probably average over 100.
Which is still a fantastic amount, by the way. Yeah, like I think an average for a normal person is like less than a couple books a year. So, I mean, that is still a megaton stack of books. But yeah, I was actually going to go into that in terms of the time that you're able to kind of slice out of your day to actually like normally read. But it sounds like it's a little bit difficult, especially for the fantasy genre, right? Because you're in that so much. Like, are you just inundated right now with requests? Because I see your name so often now in terms of we had Sarah Chorn edit my book. It's I just see your name all over the place now. So, is it crazy to see?
Um, yeah, it's been kind of weird over the past year. I feel like I've seen my name pop up in conversations a bit more, and that's been weird. It's been it's been strange. I don't usually know what to do, so I kind of just fade away and la la la, can't see me. Um, but it's also really cool. I get to see a lot of these books before anyone else does, and I get to have a little bit of a finger in the creative process, and that's really cool. It's I love watching things take shape. Like
Mhm.
they already get to me and they're amazing. I don't take books that I can't get behind. And so every book that I take is a book that I want to read. I genuinely want to read this. And they're already good. It's just it's so cool to be part of the process of just polishing the diamond, of
Mhm.
taking the edges off and helping kind of hone the shape of the thing. It's great. So
Now, pretend that I am 5. Can you explain like what you do as an editor to people who are watching this that don't really know what all goes into it? Because I know when I first started this booktube journey, I was just talking about the books that I've been reading, but then diving and talking with indie authors out there, there's just so much that goes into books that I didn't even realize until starting this journey here, and a huge portion of that is the editing piece of it. And coming into it, I had no idea. I didn't even know there was different levels of editing. I thought it was just one single swoop, and then that was it. But no, there's just so much into it. So,
yeah. Editing can be a bit overwhelming, and I have a class I kind of teach sometimes to author like groups of writers and conventions and stuff about editing, what it is for new writers, because it can be completely overwhelming.
hmm.
So it's kind of when you break down the parts of a story, it's kind of easy to figure out what all the different parts of editing are. But the first part would be developmental, and that's when you go in there and you look at the plot and the structure, and you look for plot holes and character development. You make sure A leads to B, and the motivations make sense. That's where you take the story and you look at the structure of it, and you're just looking at how the story flows. And then the writer the author will usually have to rewrite long bits of it. That's when they'll be like,
Yeah.
this entire chapter doesn't work, rewrite it.
Oh,
And here's an idea. That's the developmental portion. That's
got
the
it.
part that hurts. And then usually they'll get it and then they'll send it back. And then you go for like line editing. And that's kind of I'm really happy with line editing. That's my special place. I love it. But it's when you make the sentences look pretty. You make sure they make sense. This word is only used once in this paragraph.
Hmm.
If two sentences start with the same word, I mention it. It's just flow. It's looking at flow and rhythm and does this fit the author's voice, that kind of stuff. And then there's copy editing, which is after all of that crap's done. You're done with all of it. So your vase has been created and you have all of the elements outside where you need them to be. And then you send the vase back to the pottery shop or whatever.
Hmm.
And, the copy editor comes in and they'll make sure the continuity issues, like a character's eye color doesn't change for
Oh
no
yeah, yeah.
reason between page 10 and page 23. And they'll make sure your commas are where they should be and that you don't overuse M dashes. I'm sorry, authors, but that is a problem. And all of that kind of stuff. And then the last kind of editing is proofreading, and that's the person their
Wow.
job is to go through it, make sure it reads well. When a good proofreader is done with a book, they should be able to literally just send it to be published. It should be done when they're done. So
So
yes,
four, basically you said four different levels, like developmental, and then
yeah.
what was the
And
next
then
one?
line,
Line, and then
like copy
copy, and then proofreading.
editing, proofreading.
Do you do all four of those, or do you focus on a particular set right there?
Well, I can do all four of them. I don't enjoy all four of them. I will proofread for my authors if they ask me to, but that's the only time I will ever proofread. That's like my least favorite part of editing. I hate it. I'll do it, but at that point, I'm just like, no, it doesn't let me tinker, and I like to tinker, and so proofreading
Oh,
makes me feel like I don't have hands or something, and I don't like it. So that's that's my thing. But I can do the rest of them. I like line editing. I access all of editing in my mind through lines. So for me, I'm always tinkering with how something's flowing. That's my default state. And then I developmental too. I can tear it apart. I love tearing it apart. I like telling people how to make it
you're not
better.
being mean. Okay, you're
No, no.
constructive criticism here.
Yeah, and that's the key is you have to be constructive. And because I mean none of us is perfect and I make sure all of my authors know, I'm just giving you suggestions over here. Like
Hmm.
this is consider this a professional suggestion. But you need to trust your voice and your vision for the story before you trust anything I say. So like it's just, you have to be constructive, but you also have to know the author is always the first person who gets to say anything. So you have to bend to them. They're hiring me. I'm their employee right now.
Hmm.
So, you know.
Are you also Ryan Cahill's editor? I know he mentioned it or retweeted that once we had
Yeah.
put out there. And which did you do all four of those stages that we talked about, or was it one in particular for Ryan?
He usually uses me for developmental and line. That's what most people do.
Okay. So when he
So.
reached out to you for this behemoth of a book right here, did you look at this like that word count and go,
No,
"Holy cow,
so
Ryan, what is
he
going
was
on here, man?"
he was really smart, and I don't think either one of us realized that this was smart until like way after the fact. But he was writing it and editing it at the same time. So for him, we had like this crazy deadline and he had to break the book into chunks. And so he would send me this chunk and then I would edit it and I would send it back to him and he would edit that and write the next chunk at the same time. And so we did the whole book in batches. So I had no idea how long it was until it published. I had no idea. If he'd
Wow.
sent it to me in one document, I think it would have overwhelmed me to the point where I would have been like, dude, no. But since I had no idea, it worked. And his next one, he's saying might be roughly the same length. And so I'm going
Yes,
to advise the same thing to him. Send it to me in chunks and don't tell me how long it is. Thank you.
the chunking method. That's hilarious, yeah. Because I was actually talking to Ryan a couple of weeks ago. I was like, "So is the next one going to be about this big too?" He's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So,
Yeah, yeah.
but it
I was talking to him about that the other day. I was like, "Okay, which month am I carving out for you? Because it's gonna be big." And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be the same length as the last one." Cool. So batches, dude. Send it to me in batches. Ryan, send it to me in batches. That's But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's hilarious. So now that I know, or anyone watching this, if you have a huge, huge chunky book, just send it to you in chunks over time.
Yeah.
Don't tell you
Yeah.
the page count either.
It works because otherwise I get overwhelmed. I
Mhm.
like psych myself out with the length of it.
So
So
do you in terms of like prioritizing the requests that come to you, like do you already have like a set few months out, or do you work in like 2 week sprints? Like how do you prioritize all the incoming inbound requests to you?
so I schedule based on turnaround dates more than so I can kind of take a book whenever someone's ready to send it to me. That doesn't mean you're going to get it right away.
Yeah.
That means my if you send it to me today, my first turnaround right now is the end of April. So it's I'll base it on that instead, and then that gives me about a month because I usually ask for a book for about a month to
Hmm.
move the books that I have that month around to best fit them into my week. And then, I touch base with the author usually on like Wednesday and or Thursday of their turnaround week, and I'll shoot them between Friday and Monday. I'll usually get this to you depending on
Hmm.
how tired and burned out I am. It it takes me my thing is it takes me forever to write these edit letters. Like I send pages to these authors and sometimes I'll break it down by chapter and I mean it can be hours. And I like to have a night to sleep between when I finish it and when I write those to have distance. And so sometimes that'll adjust my turnaround on the weekend based on when I finish and how rested I feel and how much time I
Hmm.
need away from it. Big books immerse me more, and I have to take more time to pull myself out of it to see the big picture. So that's that. Now, with my queries, these have been a bit of a problem recently, and I don't really have a system yet because I have a lot of them coming in and it's kind of freaking me out. So it's um and I have this personal philosophy, my paying authors always come first. And so I kind of let these queries backlog while I'm finishing all this stuff. And then by the time I get to them, there's just this mountain, and I'm like, oh my god, what do I do? So
Yeah.
that's been something I'm working on. I'm working on that. That's my yes. So that's my process, kind of.
Okay. You said paying authors come first in terms of
Time.
ones that.
Yeah. So I don't want to cut into the if I have a deadline that week, I'm not going to cut into the author's time to do samples until
Oh,
I'm
okay.
done
Got it.
with what they need to have done, if that
The
makes sense.
people that are already
The
in
job's
your
always going to
active
come
process.
first. Yeah, like my paying clients, my authors who have things on the hopper are
Got it.
always going
Okay.
to come first, and then everyone else comes after. And then recently, that's been a bit of a problem. So I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
work that out. But
Yeah, like, I bet right now, do you have like a stack of emails that you still have to get through every week, or do you look at your new inbound requests like once a week, or as they come in, or you just let them stack and look at them in a particular time?
I kind of just let them stack, and then I try to have one day a week that I just do email, and that's not
Okay.
really been working that well. So I'm working on it. It's been kind of a system. I'm kind of toying this week with doing maybe an hour each day of just doing samples. So I don't know. I'll land somewhere. I'm working on it.
Hmm. No, that's great. I think that's a maybe a good problem that you have so many requests coming your way because your name is just being put out there. Ryan Cahill is speaking your name to the masses. You know, he's one of the biggest indie authors out there. So, I mean, that's humongous. So that's great. So, I know if I were to ever write something, I would want to put something in your stack in your mountain of requests as well. So, in terms of like new inspiring authors who are just getting into it, like at what point should they reach out to you? Is it when they have a completed manuscript, or when they are about almost done with it, like, or when they just even have the idea of writing something? Like, when's the best time to reach out to you in terms of the whole editing process?
mean, people can reach out whenever. Some people like to know before they even start writing, like what they're in for.
Oh
And
yeah.
others just, care when they're done and they're shopping for someone. And it just depends on what you want. I can answer any question for anyone, depending on what they're looking for. Um, if you're if you query an editor, that doesn't mean your manuscript's always going to be accepted, though.
Mm,
And that's one thing that sometimes people have a hard time with. Getting a book edited that's not ready for an edit is
um,
always more detrimental than beneficial. And that's one reason I always tell authors when I teach these classes, you need to demand a sample edit because you need to know what your money is paying for.
yeah.
Like, is this editor going to do what you want to have done to your manuscript? You need to know that. It's an investment, it's not cheap. So and it's something you love. And that so get a sample. But
Hmm.
on the editor side, I need to make sure that your book is ready for what I can do on it. If it's not, if I can't make sense of what's happening, if it looks like it might need another round or something like that, I'll tell the author because it's not worth spending money on an edit if you're not ready for the edit yet. And it's not a slight against the author. It's not anything about the quality. It's saying nothing about the book. It's just, everyone has a book that needs another draft. And
Yeah.
usually in these cases, I'll just write them and say, look, I just think you need one or two more drafts, maybe a beta read. That's it. And then I'll be glad to take a look again. But when you go through it, look for this thing, and this thing. And I'll kind of give them bullet points of what I saw and what to look for. And, they'll either touch base or they won't. And that's kind of the purpose of the sample. It goes both ways. You need to see if I'm capable of what you want to have done.
Yeah.
And I need to see that you can handle criticism, one, because some people cannot, and I will not work with them. And I need to make sure that your book is ready to be edited. And so it's a two-way street. And my advice is any editor who won't do a sample, or even if you have to pay like $5 or a cursory fee for it or something, it's worth it just for that alone, just knowing that you can work together alone.
What's like one of the biggest like red flags that you see immediately that you know this book is not ready for you to dive into it deeper? Is it like the punctuations, the things that like what's like the biggest thing? You're just like, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, you need another draft, another revision.
It usually has to do with clarity. I've had this issue a bit recently, and it's kind of made me think about maybe some of the triggers that tell me that a book's not ready. And I've realized my biggest one is matters of clarity. And it's usually an issue of the author not effectively getting the information out to readers. And so it's happened enough recently. I thought of a little metaphor, and I'll give it to you. You're going to be thrilled. I mean, you're going to be so glad I'm on this thing. I'm going to put everyone to sleep. So my the thing is, it's like the saying of driving a used car off the lot. The
Yeah.
second you buy that car, you drive it off the lot, it loses some of its value, right? So that's the common saying. So you drive the car off the lot, it loses its value. It's the same thing with our stories. But the car is the story, and the lot's your brain, and you're driving the story out of your brain. And it's losing some of its value, which means it's losing some of its clarity and some of its depth and stuff. The story is alive inside of us. It's not alive inside of the reader.
Yeah.
So we know all of the weird stuff about our cars because it's our car. Like, we know what it does when you turn left and the steering wheel shakes, and you know the thing the windows do when you roll it down. It's our car, we know that. But the reader doesn't know that yet. It's not their car. And so most of the issues happen with driving the car off the lot, with not getting the information from your brain to the reader in an effective way. And so usually in instances like that, I'll have a hard time off the bat making sense of any part of what's happening. And there's an immediate difference. I can just instantly tell There's a lot of information that's still being kept in the author's lot that's not getting driven out yet. It's not making it to the reader. And that's an issue that you need to work on before I can do anything here. Like, we need this information and this information and this information. And it's usually mostly a setup thing. Usually most of the book after 25% is fine. But that 25% might need a little bit more work for me to be able to understand what's going on. And until I can understand what's going on, I can't edit it. So that's usually, I could go on for a while. I'm sorry, but that's usually the very long way of me saying it's a clarity thing, and here's why.
I think it's a great metaphor. So, like, what do you mean you don't know that you have to jiggle the key to get it started? What do you mean you don't know that? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with a story.
Well, no, I think that's a great way to put it. Because I know, like, the story is that person's baby. They know that thing inside and out. But getting it onto a page to the person actually consuming it, like, you need to explain it in a way where it passes through inside of their brain too.
There can also be issues with, like, some of these people, especially in secondary worlds. Like, think of Ryan's series. Dude has to have an Encyclopedia Britannica in his brain of just world building stuff, like, because his books are so long. And you have to know, as an author, which of that information the reader needs to know and which you want them to know, because they're two very different things. And a lot of the time, those can get confused, especially at the start, and especially when you're setting up a secondary world. It's really, really hard to parse which information the reader needs to make sense for the story, and which information you want them to have because you think it's really cool, because you've been building this world for a really long time, and you want us to see 10 pages of details about this awesome sword. You know, that's really cool, and I bet it feels good, but it doesn't work in the intro. It doesn't. I'm sorry. And so usually there's issues with that too. And so, yeah, a lot of informational stuff, especially with secondary world fantasies.
That is very interesting. Yeah, because I know, like, even some books I read, it can be a challenge sometimes to dig into it, right? Like right off the get go, especially when there's a lot of verbiage that you have no idea what this word even means. I guess that brings up another question for you in terms of, does the author like give you like a glossary in terms of this is what this random made up word means, like when you're going through it, so you know exactly what it means, or in your process, are you looking for that word to be explained somewhere?
So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. Story Bibles are a thing, and I do get them, and I love it when I get them. Those are usually an author will write out the default punctuation they want you to have, if there's any weird capitalization, words that they might know that they misspell a lot, that kind of thing. Just keep track of, this character has green eyes, and if I ever say they don't have green eyes, it's a lie, change it. You know, that just a default, here's what I need right here, pay attention to it. So I do get those, and they're very helpful. But regarding words like that, I usually try not to know. And I think the reason how do I say this? A lot of times in fantasy, I think authors rely too much on glossaries at the end of the book. Not everyone's going to flip to the end to read it.
Yeah.
And I'm the only person who's ever going to read this scene twice, because you're paying me to read it twice. So that's it. Nobody else is going to do this. And if they do, they're a very special case. We're one and done people. So you have one chance to make what this word means clear. And if you're not making it clear to me, then you're not making it clear to your readers. And that's a problem. And the glossary is not going to save you. That's a clarity problem in your writing. We need to give this some contextual padding so people know what the hell it means without scrolling to the end. That's it. That's it. It's usually just a matter of filling in a few words. And it's that car driving it off the lot thing. A lot of times the author will assume it's clearer than it really is. It loses clarity when it leaves our brain. And so they'll pull back sometimes on moments of like information. They'll be like, oh, it's clear, so I'm hitting this too hard. And usually the minute you start thinking that is right when you're starting to hit the point where a reader's going to start understanding what you're talking about. So yes, it's the same thing with language.
No, that's great, because I know sometimes, like when I'm reading through a book, and like even me, like I read something, and then maybe a few minutes later, I already forget what that particular character's name was and what their role is. So sometimes, like when they reapproach that person or that thing, like they kind of like retell what its purpose is in like a different type of way, to where I'm like, oh yeah, that guy, he does this. I remember now. So thanks for reinstating that to me. So um, driving the car up the lot, I like it. In
Yeah,
turn,
it's worked. It's been a problem I've had a lot recently, and it's made me think about that kind of thing a little differently, I think. So
I got a question for you in terms of sample edits. In terms of like what a sample edit is that like one of those particular four segments that we talked about, or is it just developmental, or is it just like what's all included in a sample edit when they reach out to you?
so every editor is going to be different. So you'll have to ask based on the editor. I kind of operate, I think, maybe a bit differently than most editors, and I have a feeling I'd get poo-pooed for this in certain circles. But the fact of the matter is, most indie authors only have money for one edit once. They're not going to have money to pay for someone to do this 4 times. So they're just not. Nobody is. Period.
Mm,
Publishers do that, but in indie we have to flex to make room for what people have and what they need. And we're out here kind of in the wild west of publishing. We got to make room for things. So I kind of operate on the theory that we all have one pass through this, and I will do as much to every book as I can. I'll correct your commas, and I will also tell you I don't like this section at the same time. And I will tell you why. And my theory is, if you wanted to rewrite this, here's the reasons why, and here's what I would suggest. If you want to keep this, here's where I'd put the commas, that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I do. So in my sample edits, I try to show the author all of that. I try to give them what I would give their book. And every book will tell me what it needs, depending. Some books are clean and all they really need is like a copy edit. And then
mhm.
some of them come to me and I'm like, this needs a lot. And some of them come to me and I'm like, you just need a proofread. What are you doing? So it just depends, and I'll tell them off the bat. And that's just what that's the sample edit. That's the fun. We don't know until we get into it.
Look at that. We got Ryan here today. This piece of a book right there.
Ryan, I was just yelling at you or about you or something.
We like the chunking method. Send Sarah
Yeah.
chunks. Don't tell her the entire
Send me
word count.
chunks. Yeah, don't tell me how long the next one is. I don't want to know. It's going to freak me out.
So have you mainly worked on like indie works, or do you do some work for traditional publishers as well?
Yeah, I do some work mostly for small presses I get hired for. Um, I work for Grimdark Magazine, so I do all their magazine edits. I did their last novella that just got released today. Um, that's been fun. That's been really fun. Mostly, I just work in indie though. That's where my heart is. So he's gonna. You should ask him, whoever interviews him next, to talk about his puppy because it's adorable, and I can't
Oh,
wait. He's getting a puppy, and it's really cute, and he's been showing me videos, and it's adorable. So
and I want you to see
anyway,
that, Ryan. We see the puppy.
yeah, puppy. um, what the hell was I talking about? He
Grimdark
totally derailed
magazine.
me. Yeah,
Uh,
Dark Magazine. God, he totally threw me off my game. I mostly do indie. Indie's where my heart is. I never know what I'm getting. I like how diverse the stories are. There's genre blending, and there's just stuff happening in indie that always keeps it vibrant and alive. And I feel kind of boxed in a bit more when I work with publishing houses and stuff. Grimdark Magazine's been a great mix between, because Beth is very supportive of indie and she's really in the community and she's just so enthusiastic. So she's always like listening to suggestions and flexing and stuff. That's been great, but my heart's always with indie.
That's great. I didn't even know that you were working with Grimdark magazine as well, because I've seen, like, as soon as I entered this whole book space on social media, Grimdark magazine has always been somewhere on there where I see them publishing something. So I didn't even know you worked with them. So what all do you do for them? That's amazing.
Adrian hired me to finish the edit for The King Must Fall, their last anthology. And so I was
Oh,
kind of, I feel in some ways, I was thrown into the deep end. I mean, I was scared. I was scared to death. I can't even tell you. I mean, he sent me a story by Cameron Hurley, and I think I might have had a heart attack. I just about like died. You know, there's some authors in there. He handed me a novella from, I can't even remember. I think it was Anthony Ryan, and he's like,
Anthony
edit
Ryan.
this, and I'm like, why do you think I should touch something he wrote? It was just so crazy. So that freaked me out. And then he did this novella, and so there have been a few other projects he's talked to me about, but so far it's been mostly the magazine. Beth will send me the short stories for it, which I'll edit, and then she'll publish. So
That's awesome. How long have you been working with them? Has it been like a couple of years, or are we talking months?
I'm thinking it's been since around the pandemic, I think, maybe a little after.
Mhm.
I don't
Okay.
know. I can't tell. I don't know. Time is a blur. It's been a few years,
You know what's
a year
crazy
or two.
is that we've been talking about all this, on the editing side of things, but you're also an author. You have your own books out there. So I know,
Yeah,
was Necessity of Rain, did that one just come out not that long ago, or is that
in June. Yeah,
in June? Okay, because I remember, Bo's here with us right now, and he helped run that giveaway for that special edition, which looked stunning. I know, I think Bo, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was like one of the top like entered giveaways like on the entire Discord for that book, which is amazing that so many people were looking for that book, because I know it's a beautiful edition. I think I even see it right behind you right
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. I have one here too. I'm
Oh, there it
shamelessly
is.
promoting myself. Yeah, yeah. They did a really good job. I was amazed.
You see that?
Yeah.
Blew away all the previous entry count. So that's amazing. So I guess a funny question. Do you edit your own books, or do you have another set of eyes from someone else look at your words?
I have an editor. Are you kidding? I can't trust myself. No, 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 I don't edit my own stuff. That would be awful. No, I have my own editor. His name's Nathan Hall, and he absolutely hands my ass to me, and it's great. So I hate him and I love him in equal measure. He saves me from myself, and I curse his name. But he's great, and he understands my writing, um, which is important because I write weird stuff. So we kind of have a wavelength thing. For myself, I have to set rules or I never make any progress. I will spend hours discussing if it should be which or that in a sentence. Like I will navel gaze my writing to death. So I have to set rules or I'll never get anywhere. I don't let myself. It's one pass and then I send it to Nathan. I can't even do one edit on it. So
Look at Andrew's saying that he's seeing reviews of it breaking people. Oh man.
yeah. Yeah, I really go for it in this one.
That's awesome. So, um, do you have any other works kind of in your pipeline right now in terms of writing, or are you kind of focused on your editing backlog that you have of your mountain of requests coming your way?
I don't know. I have ideas for stuff I want to write. I'm trying to decide right now if there is enough interest in my work to justify the time spent writing it. And I've been a bit of a fence sitter on that for a few months now.
Hmm.
So I have ideas, but I haven't done anything, and I vacillate wildly between I'm just going to edit forever now, and maybe I'll try it one more time. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm landing. Life's an adventure.
I feel like for me, maybe for you in terms of writing and editing, maybe it's like a mood type of thing. Because I know for me, as a reader's perspective, like I can not have a TBR at all and just randomly pick up whatever book that just pops into my brain. Oh yeah, I want to read that. Like I just randomly start books sometimes and say I'm just in the mood for it. I know some people who plan their TBR to the T for like an entire
Yeah.
year and they do not deviate from that TBR. But I can barely plan a month out. So maybe it's a whole entire mood type of thing. Um, do you? I guess going back to the mood, like when you go to a particular book that you're working on, like do you have to be in a particular mood to work on someone's book in terms of it being like a genre that it's just different from what you typically work on, or do you usually work within a set fantasy and sci-fi or fiction based role, or like what's that look like for you?
I I have an author who I started editing for her. She was one of my very first authors, and she wrote young adult fantasy at the time. And I met her doing that, so I edited her series, and she was like she was one of my very first, like grandfathered in at the original rate of, and then she kind of went dark for a while, and I didn't know what happened to her. I thought maybe I'd pissed her off or something, but it turned out she'd had a baby and she'd had postpartum depression that really spun her out something fierce. And so she went to her therapist, and her therapist said, try writing something different
Hmm.
and, just to shake things up a bit. And so she tried that, and she ended up stumbling into erotica and made an absolute killing off of it. And then, so then I
Wow.
was editing all this erotica stuff, and she started going into some directions that were just it was just too much for me. Like I can do blood, but there's some things I just don't want to read,
Hmm.
um like involving ginger and stuff that so anyway, it was stuff that it's not me stuff, and um I had to be in the mood for a while, and then there came to be a point where I was like, I just can't. Like I'm not an erotica editor. Like there's bumping uglies does not interest me, and reading about it makes me tired, and I just don't want to. And it's just it's not you, it's me. And so she ended up finding another really good one, and that's a better fit for all of us. And then
Hmm.
she's diving into fantasy again, so we're gonna start up again. That'll be better. That'll be
Well, there
much
we
better.
go.
But yeah, you have to be in the right mood for some of it, and some of it's just not for you. And it's like it's it's not you. It's definitely me thing. Like if you don't want an editor to work on your book who is not interested in your book. So
Hmm.
I like beheadings more than sex scenes. I don't know. That's just who I am. So
Now, all the books that you edit, do you also mark those like in your Goodreads stats? Because you're reading the books as well. You're reading the story. I bet your Goodreads stats would be through the roof of how many books you get through, like in a given year. I mean, it's in pretty high.
I I try to, but I have a list on Goodreads that I keep a shelf of all the books that I've edited. I'm terrible at keeping up with that, like terrible. And it's hard to keep track because some of them publish right away, some of them are going to submissions, some of them are going to publishers, and they fly all these different directions, and it's really hard for me to keep track of which ones go where. So I usually just forget. for about a year, and then I'll be like, oh, and catch up. But yeah, there's a shelf. I used to rate them, but I don't anymore. Um, yeah, it's a work in progress.
Welcome. I know we were talking a little bit ago in terms of, I think you were writing, you see, you mentioned you did a class
Mhm.
for like new level, like entry authors coming into it. Like, where is that class like hosted? Is it through like YouTube, or is it on your blog, or like what does that class look like?
No, I taught it a few times for the League of Utah Writers, and I've taught it for a few other classes, writing groups via Zoom during the pandemic.
Okay.
I've also done one on evocative writing, and then I had a writing group last year have me teach them like sentence structure and stuff. So I have stuff like that going all the time. Just yeah, it's usually just when people reach out and say, "Hey, I have a writing group. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about?" Yeah.
I don't know if I have this right or not. I think maybe a few months ago, I read somewhere, I think that you were putting together like a FAQ document or something in terms of like your most asked questions in terms of uh,
Oh,
writing. And you said I think you're looking for interest to see if people would be interested into it. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, heck
yeah.
yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, that was a podcast idea actually that
Oh, a podcast.
someone
Okay.
pitched me. Yeah, and then someone else was like, "Oh, well, you should turn it into classes that people could, pay to do online." And so I don't know, but the general idea was do something but structure it like the top 5 problems I see when I edit and how to fix them, or, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And I do think something like that would be useful. I get asked stuff like that all the time. Like, what do you do with adverbs? How do you feel about evocative writing? I get asked about a lot, or writing disabilities, or any of that stuff. And I know I
Mm.
could teach, like, I mean, I talk a lot when people let me, as you can see. And so, so I feel like I could get information out that might be valuable. I just don't know how yet. So there's ideas people have pitched me, and I'm kind of toying with them, maybe having a summer project.
Yeah. Now you have a lot of like pokers in the fire. There's a lot going on for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a million things happening all the time.
Now, I guess a random question here. What do you think about third person versus first person? Is there a preference there for you as a reader and also as a editor, or does it not really matter to you?
So it's knowing what story you're trying to tell and knowing the best way to tell it. You don't use one knife for every task in the kitchen. And I and they are two very different knives. First and third they do different things.
Mm,
If you want intense, personal, emotional, you want first person. Usually. There's always exceptions, and yes, people are going to come at me and say, but what about? Yes, what about, guy? You're right. That's true. There's always that. So there's usually, if you want intense and emotional and deep core character driven, it's I. Um, if you are looking more broad scope, wide ranging stuff, you're gonna want third person. Oh, there's the dog.
where's Clover?
Yeah, yeah, and the child. Um,
Hello, welcome.
yeah. So, anyway, yes, that's first versus third. They're just different knives. They cut
Mm.
different kinds of meat. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I see online sometimes a lot of people kind of just when they approach like a first person book or a like first POV book, they just kind of push it away, push it to the side a little bit. I'm not really sure why, because I know some of my favorite stories are in first person POV, and I'm a big fan. So I was just wondering from your perspective when looking at it, but I like that way of describing it.
I,
Two
I
different
think
tools
some
here.
I think some things get a bad rap, and it's undeserved. Like romance, for example, as a genre gets laughed about a lot. They're like the punchline of a lot of jokes, which is undeserved because the authors are incredible. And if you want to learn how to sell books, you need to pay attention to them. Um, but stuff like that happens. It's also first versus third. People will also laugh about lyrical prose a lot. There's this stuff all over the place that people, it turns into the punchline of a joke before people really understand what the tools are that are being discussed. If you like my books, my last book, The Necessity of Rain in third person would have been awful. Awful. It would not have worked at all. So it's just, you've got to fit the task, and readers who don't give things a chance because, they might not understand the tool as it's being used. That's unfortunate for them. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you don't like first person, there's plenty of third persons that can, fit your bill. It's not, you're fine. It's fine. We all have preferences.
Hmm. And that's good to hear. I know I'm a big fan of really, like sometimes when I go into a book, I barely even notice that it's in first person. So, oh yeah, they're saying I. Like, okay. Like, it doesn't really phase me that much at all. But I really like how you did bring up that it can be way more personal and, close to the character. You're getting their emotions and you're getting whatever they see, like at that instant. So I like that way of describing it. So for you as a writer, was it a little bit like challenging going from writing third person to first person, or did it just come naturally in terms of the story that you were trying to tell?
Um, so my books are kind of awful because I don't I don't write just one way. Like it's kind of like when I write, I take everything I see when I edit and then I say I'm not going to do any of that. And so I don't have one timeline. I don't just tell one story. I don't
Hmm.
have one perspective. Um, of Honey and Wildfires, I had first person present tense. I had a first person past tense. I had a third person. I can't remember if I think it switched between past and present. So I kind of go all over the place. Necessity of Rain. I told my editor beforehand, I was like, I have one timeline. I'm gonna have one timeline in this one. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
very proud. Watch this, Nathan. One timeline. No, I had two. So I'm always breaking the rules.
I guess I'm gonna ask the question here that you said that everyone asks you, but only ask for one. Instead of like the top five most common mistakes, what's your top one that you see with the people sending you their manuscripts that you point out the most often?
Um, I think recently it's really been clarity issues. It's most of my edits have revolved around clarity issues
Okay.
like that.
You gotta make sure to drive the car off the lot and be clear.
Yeah,
Get the
yeah,
idea
we gotta
across
we
the.
gotta know what we're buying. You gotta tell us the weird thing that it does when you turn left. We have to know.
So for people to get in touch with you, would you recommend them to go to your website, which I did link in the YouTube details, by the way. So anyone watching this back, you can click it there. But I think it's just like saraedits.com, something like that. Or
Yeah, sarahchornedits.com.
okay, so I was close. I just forgot the last name.
Yeah.
In terms of your social media tag at Bookworm Blues, um, or did this name like have any meaning to it when you set it up, or is there anything like deeper
No,
to
it
it?
was the name of my website when I was reviewing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I just kept it. It's still there. You can still look at it. I don't think I've reviewed since like December. So it's I
What's the last book that you reviewed?
can't even remember. I'll have to look it up. Hang on. Oh, it's gonna bug me. Let's see. Loading. To Ride Hill's Chasm by Jenny Wirtz, November
Oh,
2nd.
any word? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she's amazing. And then
I've
before
heard
that, it was April. So yeah, I'll go months between them.
no, I've heard a lot of good things about Janie Warts. Yeah, I see her name pop up all the time. I have not picked up a book by her just yet, but I think I need to because I've heard so many freaking amazing
Yeah,
things.
her Wars of Light and Shadow series is some of the most detailed, layered, textured, non-striding. Like you have to really focus when you read it, but the payoff is incredible. It's a good series. Highly recommend.
Was that the one that's there's like 7, 8 books in the series, or is even more than that?
Yeah, yeah. I think she just released the last one.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I think Beard of Darkness just had her on not that long ago. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. So
yeah. She's amazing.
so I think we're coming close here towards the tail end of this thing, and usually at the end of these, I kind of put whoever I'm talking to on the spot just a little bit in terms of just giving you kind of the floor to say anything that's in your mind, anything that you want to say to anyone who's watching it up until this point, or who's ever watching this on replay in the future. And it can be about your books, it can be about editing, it can be a fun tidbit, and
Oh my gosh. So you're
no
gonna give me all
question,
that space, and I'm just gonna sit here and say, I don't know. uh,
anything come to mind.
no, nothing. I got nothing.
How about when people send you manuscripts, and if they're a chunky book, send in batches?
Yeah. Yeah, discuss about sending it to me in batches. That's currently the only way I will accept manuscripts in chunks, is if the book is over, I mean, goddamn length long. Then batches is the only way.
I guess going to the opposite side of that, like what's the smallest edit that you've been requested for? Like, here's a 1,000 word essay. Can you please edit this for me? Did you ever get like requests like that?
Yeah, I mean, Grimdark magazine is sometimes stuff like that. It just
Okay.
depends. Yeah.
I bet you, I bet you're able to like breeze through those pretty quickly in terms of, actually, that's a good question. Like, what does like a single page look like for you in terms of like going through it in your process? In terms of time, or does it really just vary for the work or the piece?
It's going to depend on how much on the page needs work, how clear it is, how well I'm understanding it. It's just going to depend on what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine that. I know some works are very dense, and just trying to read through it, you're just like, hold on, let me read that one more time because I don't know what I just read. So,
Yeah,
um,
sometimes I'll read a whole book through before I'll ever work on it. Like there's some I'll read it and then I'll sit on it for a week
oh
and
yeah,
then I'll go back to it. That's why I like having them for a month, because I never work on anything straight through. I always have to take breaks at certain points and let what I've edited kind of sink into me and then get ready for what comes next. I get so close to it, I stop seeing the forest. I start only seeing the trees, if that
hmm
makes sense. So I have to pull back a few times. And that's, yeah.
I guess kind of last question. Maybe it's an easy one, maybe not. What is your favorite book of all time?
Oh, I don't know. Um, all right, I'll say I don't know. I don't know about favorite, but I know one of my top favorites is going to be Never Let Me Go. And it's by an author whose name I'm not even going to attempt to say because it's Japanese and I know I'm going to butcher it. So it Never Let Me Go. I listened to the audiobook when I was at work when I still had an office job, and it wrecked me. Like I was just tears, and I mean I have never been so destroyed in my life. Not since then, not before. That book wrecked me, And for that reason alone, it's one of my top books ever. It really was the one that made me realize I want to wreck people like that. And
Wow.
so for that, I mean, I just thought, man, to be able to destroy someone on this fundamental level is a certain kind of power, and I
Yeah.
really want it. And so that's been my mission for writing. I'm chasing never let me go levels of wreckage.
I need to write that down. Never let me go by
Yeah.
somebody. That's great.
It's really popular. You'll find it.
Uh, I got one more last question. Have you ever wrecked someone so hard they're like, "All right, you're too critical on me. I'm gonna go with someone else," or no?
Probably. Probably. I probably. I mean, I I try not to be. I mean, I put everything into. I agonize over how I say things. I'll like. If I'm gonna say something that I know has the potential to hurt someone's feelings, like I, I had to this poor author. I got a book and I got like halfway into it once, and I was like, this is falling apart hard right here in the middle section, and it's because of this thing that it's going to require more rewriting, and I think you need to rewrite this section and then go through the end of it, follow this
Mhm.
all the way through, and then send the book to me again. And I felt so bad. I mean, that just it tore me apart to do that because I knew it was going to hurt his feelings, but I mean, what else are you gonna do? You have to
Yeah.
be. When they usually some of them I'm sure decide they're done with me, and I'll never hear from them again. But recently, the past few times I've had to do that, the authors have come back swinging, and I've been extremely impressed with what they come back with. Like, and I always make it clear it's not you, it's just this particular thing I don't think was thought about,
Hmm.
and it's kind of goes back too far and it goes all the way through. So, you know, and it's hard. It's hard to hear. Some of them will go elsewhere, some of them won't.
Yeah. Like you were saying earlier, sometimes some people aren't the best at taking critique, while others will take it and just build on top of it into something that's even more beautiful. So,
I'm really lucky that most of my authors are those, and it drives me all the time. They're the biggest motivating force because they all work so hard and they write the most amazing books, and it's so cool to watch my authors change the genre, and they all are, and it's cool. It's really cool to know that I'm close to people who are that talented.
yeah, I think you're absolutely talented as well, which is why your name's being popped up all the times. I know you don't, it sounds like you don't want to hear that you are, but I think you are. With how many times I hear your name popped up everywhere. I think I saw somewhere on recently, whenever they see a Sarah Chorn edited book, they know it's going to be good.
That's so wild.
But
I just am really lucky that my authors, I've managed to pull towards me the kind of books that I want to read, and the books I want to read happen to be amazing. And so that's worked out in my favor. Um, but yeah, the indie is amazing, and indie authors are incredible. They astound me every day. I'm so lucky to do what I do.
yeah, I'm right there with you. Indie books all the way. Huge indie fan here as well. But I think we're here. We're at the ending point now. I just wanted to say thank you so much again for joining me tonight, Sarah, and for everyone else who joined us here this evening. And I guess a final note, if you do send Sarah a book, make sure it's in chunks if it's this freaking big of a book.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
have your website listed in the description. So if anyone wants to go check out Sarah's website to learn a little bit more, you can go do that right down there. So again, thank you so much,
Awesome.
guys, for joining in. Sarah, thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good one. Peace.